I basically just grabbed the steering wheel and sat there till it stopped rolling. And I I unhooked the seat belt. I was laying on the side. I unhooked the seat, took the steering wheel off of it, unhooked the seat belt, fell to the ground. And the funniest thing I think I've ever heard. is by that time, my recovery truck had shown up and got there, and this one old boy is with us. He don't go out there with us every year. And the first thing he said, he's alive.
That made you feel good.
But he was so excited that I was alive. I'm thinking, it wasn't that bad.
Welcome to Oil and Whiskey, an Ironclad original. I am Josh Henning.
I'm Phil Gerber.
I'm Jeremy Gerber.
Welcome to Oil and Whiskey, an Ironclad original, presented by Blade HQ. Just go to bladehq.com/oil and whiskey to shop their selection of knives. I may or may not have shopped their selection of knives and purchased something as a surprise. It's for me, but
it's very definitive.
I once again
looked at some cleavers,
filled the shopping cart,
and didn't.
And I just didn't bring it home. I got busy.
I'm waiting for Black Friday sales.
Yeah, but I got something coming. Late night last night, couldn't sleep so good, thumbing around the old Instagram, and something was dropped. And I was able to secure it. So via my wife's PayPal, which I don't know how to use, and it was the only way to pay. So I woke her up. She was all disoriented. I'm like, check your phone. It's just like a PayPal thing or something on there. Send it to me.
So, on pins and needles.
Next week, boys.
I guess I need to buy something now. I get shit that I bought something and didn't tell us, and then both.
I'm telling you guys about it.
All right.
That's we're
openly upfront about stuff.
Right. This is
like things in private.
Right. This is like a team. Yeah. Right. It's like we're in a circle. Right. We're all in the circle.
Circular, up and down, and around.
Well,
harness good, block bad.
Speaking of pins and needles, I've been on pins and needles for this episode for quite some time. Today's guest is George Poteet. Period.
Yeah.
Hard stop.
Enough said.
Nothing else to be said. Because we would just do it injustice anyway. If you don't know who George Poteet is,
then you're not worth knowing.
I don't know why you're listening to this podcast anyway. We also have another edition of RoadsterShop Hall of Fame. But first, it's time for On the Gas. On the Gas.
Oh, wow.
Dude.
Just get better and better. We got it on the gas. New on the gas. Who do we have on the gas this week, fellas? Somebody's going to get a kick out of this because I know somebody that works here that listens. Quite the fan. Sends a few texts, and you've been on those email chains.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What do we got?
You got all the insider information. I'll let you drop it this time.
We've got Dakota Digital.
Ooh.
Talk about somebody that's on the gas.
Damn. Yep.
They've been on the gas for quite some time.
Kind of changed the game in the gauge world. Made our lives a lot easier and take a lot of the guesswork out of what gauge package is going in a car.
They've taken it to the red line.
Oh.
I don't know. I don't like that. I don't think I like that.
They've maxed the RPMs out.
Yeah. Let's just
really.
They do a great job. Their gauges. I mean, they make us look great. They make all these builders look great. It's like such a great addition to the interior of the car. It really gives you such an awesome, OEM level experience in there. The backlighting, the function, the digital displays.
The old OBS.
Old Justin's ability to cater to all of our designs and needs.
I bet everybody there hates Justin. How many special favors?
Or hates us.
Yeah.
As a result of.
At this point, he's kind of told us there's a favor.
Yep.
We got one
use it when you really need it because
you get one favor every 12 months.
Right.
You've used your favor.
But phenomenal product. Great. I mean, great tech support, but you really don't need the tech support because the stuff it's plug and play, works so well. You see it in, virtually every top build that's out there. Always recognizable.
Little teaser here for SEMA. We'll be dropping a new product.
Yeah, they're dead on kind of with the trends or even ahead of the trends. I mean, at first they had the HDX series gauges out, and then the kind of the carbon fiber look to them. Then came out with the recent RTX gauges, and the kind of whole industry's changed to that more refined original. You want something that looks period correct in the car, but wants all the modern functionality. And I don't think you could design a better gauge if we tried.
And all that stuff is cool. But you know what the greatest part is?
What's that?
They work.
Yeah. That's nice.
You can see the gauges doing the gauge thing.
It's important
badass
stuff,
looking
man.
gauge that doesn't tell you what that gauge is supposed to tell you isn't a gauge. It's just a dial.
It's an image.
It's just an image. Yeah. Yeah. They great guys over there. Known them for years. It was pretty amazing a few years ago when we were there on the road tour to see that operation and facility in firsthand.
I figured out one thing that I can gripe about though with them.
Okay.
So they've made the gauges, the progression of those gauges from the, what did they start off?
VHX,
VHX, HDX, RTX.
Yep.
We started at our Survivor Camaro. It was with the original. That was the only one that was out there. It was their first, the VHX.
VHX, yeah.
And then we put probably 15,000 miles on that car, and then they came out with the next gauges.
Yep.
And we put them in because they look really good. And I think we put probably another 5,000 miles on it. Then we sold it.
Yep.
To Dave. And then Dave wanted the RTX gauges. So then we put those in it. And then Dave put probably another 20,000. So I don't know how many miles are on the car. We need to be able to transfer the mileage. Can you transfer the mileage?
I think that you could send it into them and they'll do it.
Really? Because now that's like a badge of honor. It used to be like,
you want to see that mileage.
Hey, just want to roll it back. Now you want to.
I'm sure they could take care of it.
Roll it forward.
Well,
give them a shout.
Great on the gas for this week. Dakota Digital. Check them out. Use them in your next build.
Yeah, they're constantly coming out with new applications. They've got just about everything you would consider building. They do a lot of custom one-off stuff, and they're always coming up with new gauges to fill those voids.
They got any of the, they're doing like a cluster for the Miata with the tack rolled so that the red lights kind of.
I'm sure they could do one, a custom one.
Nice.
Yeah. You really
that might be what's
what's dash mounted for that, don't you?
I'd want a dash mounted
that's the
tire pressure gauge.
You roll the gauge, like you see the Porsche Club Racer guys.
Up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just
that's
didn't
the
know.
secret of the pros.
Well, yeah, that's also a Porsche. I mean, Miata's a it's pulling a little bit higher G's than
sports cars.
So, gotcha. Your eye level, you don't have time to really dip down. It needs to kind of be, or a heads up display.
Yeah, or maybe just like top of the windshield mounted.
That would work.
No one's done that yet. Yeah. Innovator.
You are.
Those are two things you've never heard in the same sentence. That was Miata and innovator.
Dakota Digital. Miata Racing.
Dude, I'm thinking with all the people we've talked to, I'm going to have the sickest Miata ever built.
You think so?
Yeah.
I don't doubt it. I mean, you got a lot of resources. I think a lot of people would like to be a part of a Miata build at this point.
Tom Nelson's doing the motor at Kibby Tech, doing some long travel suspension for it.
Oh,
Dakota gauges.
That's the
maybe we'll get
a little Baja Miata, huh?
Yeah, it's the off Roadster.
What do you do? Like 29s on that thing?
I think they're like
26s,
23s before.
Well, 29 if you
can you get knobby like all terrain tires? I guess you could take like ATV tires.
ATV or wheelbarrow tires.
Yeah, wheelbarrow tires.
Some of those tensors from the Razor or whatever.
Yep,
be sweet.
If we just reskin a Razor with Miata body panels.
What if you become an enthusiast on something cooler, and we just completely forget the Miata?
I like the forgetting the Miata idea. Let's do that.
But what are you going to be as passionate about?
It's really anything at this point. Whatever I can be passionate enough to not get text, phone calls, tags of Miatas.
That wouldn't be any fun.
It's I learned like a few new features with Facebook Messenger and Instagram. You got to check your like pending messages from people that maybe you don't follow or you're not currently friends with.
Good ones?
Because they're like always floating in there, and it's always something Miata related. somebody somewhere has reached out to just simply say,
We're,
Phil likes Miatas!
we're laughing.
Exclamation point.
We're laughing. You know what's going to happen? We're going to lose Phil. There's going to be a spin-off podcast, and it's just going to be Phil, Miata enthusiast.
Men with Mazdas. They could bring the MPV guys in there, the Mazda MPV.
That's a solid vehicle. I can get behind an MPV.
That's a stretch
I
of a name.
fuck with an MPV.
Okay, here's one for you. Who would win in a fight, the Miata fans or the Florida Georgia Line fans?
It never comes to fisticuffs. That's some high-pitched screaming and yelling. There's a chest bump.
Which quickly turns into the Miata guys diffusing the situation and like finding an alternate method of,
they become friends at the end.
Some sort of agreement of like, oh, we can respect your music taste. We don't necessarily agree with them, but
I tell you, I bet you there's some Miata drivers that rock out to some Florida Georgia Line. Maybe not racing Miata enthusiast, but just a guy that likes
that owns Miata.
Well, spirited driving on the weekends. The British Racing Green.
I don't know. I don't know if there's a lot of bro country in that.
I think Florida Georgia Line crosses all boundaries. It's just music.
Okay. You ask all your friends, I'll ask mine. We'll see.
We'll get together.
Crowd, yeah.
So George Poteet is a name that if you've been in this industry long enough, he comes up in just about every circle, every builder, racing, show cars, hot rods, muscle cars, everything. We've had the pleasure of getting to know him quite well over the last 5 or 6 years. Great guy. The stories he has are endless. The records that he holds with land speed racing. And I mean, I saw an interesting stat today too. We'll talk about it. There's 12 men have been on the moon, and there's been exactly 12 men drive over 400 miles an hour. It's pretty crazy. But George also has been over 400 miles an hour, more than all of the other guys combined. I think, right?
He's the world's fastest.
World's fastest piston-powered, engine-driven man. Yeah, piston-powered, engine-driven, wheel-driven, something like that. Fast as shit. But then the cars that he has built and the shops that he has, put on the map because of those, it's endless. There's always a story about it. George here, George there, something. And the things he does behind the scenes that nobody ever even knows about makes him even a greater man and a legend. I don't use the word legend loosely, and I think we can all agree that he is a legend.
100%.
Yeah. Done some absolutely incredible things for this entire industry, and there's nobody else I can even think of to put in the same ballpark as what he's done for the car industry, for the hot rod industry. Phenomenal guy. Been involved in an insane number of the coolest of the cool projects, all aspects of it. Traditional hot rods, show cars, muscle cars, pro touring stuff, land speed stuff, just road tour cars.
An honest guy, and he'll tell you if something's ugly or not.
Yep.
George, take us back to the beginning where your love of cars and kind of the history of how all this got started.
I don't know if I can remember that far back or not. I was raised in the country in northeast Mississippi, where you had to work on cars if you wanted to have one. I was raised riding horses and bicycles and tractors, and we had an old 53 Dodge. It had to be worked on regularly to keep it running, get my mother to work. So in 1962, 63, when I really started driving. I was born in 48, so I was 15 years old in 63. But I was driving tractors and equipment when I was probably 12 years old. But I learned to deal with cars from a necessity, not as a choice.
didn't have any choice but to get it running if you had to get someplace, I guess. So you're working on cars, you're doing that. What was your first job?
My first job, I guess, feeding hogs and cows. We had a small farm that we raised pigs and cows on, and I guess the first job was working on the farm. I guess my real first commercial job was I worked in a newspaper office that ran a cut and dye press where you cut the cardboard that goes under the collars or shirts. But that was a summer job. The real first real job I had was at Pennsylvania Tire and Rubber Company in Tupelo building tires.
What year was that?
That would have been 1966.
I bet they had probably a little different work standards and a little different OSHA involvement back in 66 at the tire plant than they do now.
Well, it was, I was 18 years old.
The love for cars, George, did that start? Was there something that triggered you on that old Dodge pickup truck, or when did that set in?
Well, probably the biggest influence I had on me was Hot Rod Magazine. And of course, back then you had the beach movies going on, and there were hot rods in all of them. The muscle cars really weren't that big back then from where I came from. I never saw a Hemi engine in a car until probably 1970. The people where I came from didn't have the money to buy things like that, but we got Hot Rod Magazine and in the library of the school. And then, of course, you could, watch Sandra Dee and Elvis and everybody on the movie screen. Is usually some sort of hot rod there. But that's really, what started the big craze for me and wanting a hot rod. And I guess the biggest influence would have been American Graffiti and a 32 Ford. Everybody wanted a 32 Ford after that movie. And when I was growing up, 14 years old, there was a guy that father owned a gas station there in Manatee where I was raised. I don't know, 32.51 coupe. I don't know, garage with a dirt floor on it. And I'd go by there after school in the afternoons and watch him work on that thing. And I never saw it move under its own power though in 3 years.
Sounds like one of my projects.
Yeah. But we watched movies and magazines mainly was the biggest influence we had. And Hot Rod Magazine was the biggest influence I ever had. The cars, including the Bonneville racing. You read about it, NASCAR, Bonneville, drag racing. I grew up even before the lights came into drag racing. They flagged cars with checkered flags. So when I first started being able to go to a drag strip, and we had a small drag strip close to where I live. I never attended a NASCAR race probably till I was 30 years old. I never had the money to go to one, but we read about them. You didn't watch a lot of TV about them back then. Nothing was covered unless it wasn't under the wide world of sports. You didn't see it on television. But the biggest thing, was Hot Rod Magazine, which I still look at today.
What was the first hot rod or muscle car, something that actually you thought was fast? What was the first one you got
that I call fast?
Yeah, well, first hot rod or fast car that you were able to buy.
Well, when I was in high school, my mother had a '58 Ford with a 352 Police Interceptor in it, and that was kind of the beginning of my like for Fords. It was a pretty fast car. It was cruise-o-matic transmission in it. It didn't have 4-speed, but the first real car that I would consider fast was a '66 Mustang that I bought when I graduated from high school. A little 289 4-speed car that I bought by working at the tire factory.
What color car was that?
It was navy blue with two-tone blue interior. It had standard interior. It didn't have a pony interior, and I ran it with 2 4s, 3 deuces. I changed intakes back then like you change wheels and tires on a car now.
What was the first hot rod? 32 Ford, or which one? What was it that you bought?
In 1980, I bought a 37 Ford Coupe at the Street Rod Nationals when the high temperature that week at the Street Rod Nationals was around 118 degrees, and I walked the fairgrounds looking for something to buy that I could afford. I found a 37 Ford Coupe that was a dream car, other than it was a horrible car. For you guys, you can't understand what it is to drive a car with a Corvair front end under it.
No, I've never had the privilege of driving one with a Corvair.
It had a Corvair front end under it and a small block Ford engine in it. And
quite the combination.
It wasn't chopped or anything, but a Corvair front end back then was really the cutting edge of an independent suspension you can get if you didn't have the money to buy a Jaguar or something front end to go under. But when you were driving down the road going across bridges, it was going to go one way or the other. You didn't know which way it was going to go. But
start in the middle.
But it was going to move to the other lane, to the right or the left. But we still, even not the rack and pinion cars, but a traditional 32 Ford now, we still use a version of Chevrolet steering box on them. But man, it was hard to keep them from darting from side to side when you welded the front end in with a stick welder and tried to get it square with a yardstick, not a tape measure, but a yardstick.
In 1987, you bought that. Was that in Louisville at that time, or was that in Oklahoma?
That was in 1980 in Memphis.
Oh, Memphis.
Yeah.
So you drove it when you bought it. You drove it back home.
Well, I lived there in Memphis, and I'd moved up there, and I guess I moved up there in '72 in Memphis, and I moved to Memphis in a '64 El Camino with a small block and a 4-speed in it that I'd built. But that was the first what we call street rod I had back then, and like I say, back then, your muscle cars like your Chevelles and El Caminos and things. I don't know why we never called them muscle cars back then. Even your big block Chevelle, we didn't call muscle cars. I never heard a Mustang called a muscle car back then. But I bought that 37 Ford is what was really a hot rod back then, where we'd had the California influence, where people drove from California to Memphis to the Street Rod Nationals in their pre 48 cars. Back then, a real car show like that, it had to be 48 or earlier, or even places like the Grand National Roadster Show. You didn't see anything nearer than 48 cars. But a dream back then was to own a 32 Ford, and I drove that old 37 for 2 years, and I managed to trade with a guy in Atlanta, Georgia, for a 28 Roadster. And although it wasn't a 32, it had a 32 chassis under it. But it was during the Jimmy Carter days when gasoline was sky high back then. We were probably paying about $2.50 a gallon for it back then, and we couldn't afford it. But had a little Chevrolet uneven fire V6 in it, no top for it, no windows for it. The body was so bad when it was built. I didn't build it, but the body was so bad when I traded for it that it was welded to the frame. It wasn't bolted to the frame, but it was a nice 32 frame with split wishbone front. It had the A model spring on the back, had a Halibran quick change under it, and a little V6. And I probably put 40,000 miles on that car. And back then, we didn't have to have air conditioning, tilt steering wheel, and all that stuff on the car. But that was the first, what I considered real hot rod that I owned. That was on that Deuce frame.
It was just missing 2 cylinders. Two
It wasn't
cylinders,
out.
2 cylinders short of being a hot rod, though, right?
Well, that was right during the time that everything had shifted down from the Boss 429s to a Mustang 2 Pinto, and even after the Corvair front end we used Pinto front ends on the cars for years. We called them Mavericks, but they were basically a Pinto front end. But we really never, I never saw a big block car till I moved to Memphis in 1970. Really, I never owned a big block car until in the mid '80s. But we go to the drag strip. You see 327 Chevrolet Camaros and things running in 67, 68, and 69, and probably the most memorable car I ever remember, a 428 Super Cobra Jet Mustang coming to the drag strip in mid '68. They were 68 and a half cars all, but there was a car dealership in Starkville, Mississippi that came up to Fulton to the drag strip with that 428 car on the back of a car hauler, and I'm thinking, how in the world could you ever do that? I mean, you read about cars like that and you saw pictures of them, but to be able to stand there and watch it and listen to it run and just see the excitement from everybody around the whole drag strip there was just, that was an experience for me.
Fast forward to the first car that you paid somebody to build from scratch. When after you've gotten successful, and instead of buying cars or building them yourself, that had to be, as many of them as you were building and working on, that had to be quite the transition to hand over a large sum of money to somebody to build a car from scratch. Who was that first builder?
Don Pilkington over at Don's Hot Rods in Ohio, up at Dayton, Ohio. I met him at the Street Rod Nationals in Louisville, Kentucky, and somewhere around 1985, 86, something like that. And I actually bought a car from him, a 37 Ford Woody that he had built. He built it to sell, and I was very impressed with what he was building. He built some really nice 34 Ford coupes, all steel cars, and he built one really nice 34 3-window coupe. Sold it to Bob Reed probably in 85, 86. Donnie was down here 6 months ago. He got that car back from Bob. He's got it in his garage now, and it's still black, still got the original lacquer paint on it. But I had Donnie build a 34 Woody was the first car that I really paid to have done, and how it was a lot of money to build a car back then, but the total amount wasn't anywhere close to what you have to spend on a nice car today. Donnie built the car while he had a full-time job working at Brookville Roadster, and he built it in his backyard in the garage. And I was his first paying customer, and he went on and Donnie, I run 5 or 6 Ridler cars. He built me a Ridler car. He built me a Grand National Roadster Show car, and he built me probably 4 of the nicest street rods I've ever owned from a show standpoint. I didn't drive his cars a whole lot because they were all straight axle cars and springs and wishbones and things like that. We didn't drive cars like we did today, like you guys build now. You didn't think about getting in a car and drive it, 3,000 miles. We didn't think about getting in a car and driving it 200 miles every weekend to a local car show. But we didn't hardly drive cars back then cross country until Hot Rod started doing the power tour, and that was really what kicked off this touring thing that y'all make y'all's living doing now, the Hot Rod Power Tour. And back then, Rod and Custom Magazine had a cross country tour. Street Rodder Magazine had a cross country tour. So, we morphed from hot rods that go to the local drag strip on Saturday night and watch the races, and occasionally race your car to drag strip to getting in a car and driving it cross country like y'all have done many times. I bet you couldn't even count the number of cars that you've had drive cross country.
Yeah, at this
No.
point, no, we can't. They just roll. Sometimes when we don't even know it, they're
Yeah.
cruising all over.
Well, what y'all have done, you revolutionized hot rods, hot rodding, street rods, muscle cars, and I would say that 99% of the trends that we have today, were a direct result of what y'all done in the last 15 years. And if you look at it, you really hadn't been around a long time when you compare yourself to people like Pete and Jake's, and the Deuce Factory, and even the big company that you had before you're what you are today, the Roadster Shop. We bought Roadster Shop chassis for years, but they were all 32 Fords with straight axles and wishbones and radius rods and 4 bars. I'll live through the 4-bar craze. I've owned several cars with 4 bars on them. But what y'all have done is, I don't think that it will ever be equal in the car industry. I just can't see. One thing with the electric cars and computers we have today, I don't think we'll have the material to work with to build what we have in the last 30, 40 years. But what y'all done is, starting from scratch with things like, your front end, your A-arms, your rack and pinion steering, things like that. I don't think that we'll ever see the phenomenon of what y'all have done up there. And I really don't understand, kids like Jeremy and Phil grasping the nostalgia that we get out of y'all, and still embracing the new and modern stuff. And I know your dad had a lot to do with y'all's success, but I think probably the best thing he did for y'all's success is back up and leave you alone.
Yeah.
Wow.
Damn.
This is supposed to be about you, George. And I mean, I will say that I wasn't lumped in as a kid, because I think that
That's the gray beard.
It's the gray part. To throw it back at you though, I don't think anybody will ever realize, because you're so mild mannered and there's so many things you've done behind the scenes that you absolutely will not ever want credit for. I don't think anybody ever realizes that the industry is where it's at today because of you. And how many shops that you've given, like you said, you were their first paying customer. I'm sure you can't count how many shops you were their first paying customer, talking about us building chassis. To talk a little bit about that, of how you seek out a shop and when you think that they're ready or they're the right shop for you.
Well, the uh, first thing that I would evaluate with a shop would be the owner. What kind of lifestyle they have. If they're similar to what I believe in, and tradition, and some authenticity and some creativity in it. But I've been very fortunate to be able to pick some winners in this industry, from Don Pilkington to Dave Lane to Troy Pranier. I was all three of those guys' first paying customers. Alan Johnson painted the vehicle for me back when he was 17 years old, and I owned part of a business that had to work people and kids, and you pretty quickly learn how to evaluate a guy's character, his skills, and his uh, sincerity in what he's doing. And then you have to look at the shop that they work out of. I've never really built a car that was built in a real big shop. Like Boyd. I never had a car out there. Mainly for the reason it was too far from me out there. But you take these kids, young guys just starting out, like Alan, like Dave Lane. They're willing to try anything. They're willing to give you what you want, and they're willing to. They have the skill and the ability to steer you in the right direction. Whether you want to put pink interior in our car or not, they're able to convince you that ain't gonna work. But when I start a car with a shop like that, I have a list of things I want done to the car, and what I like to have from a creature's comfort standpoint, and what I want from an aesthetic standpoint, and what kind of quality that I want. I build different quality cars when I'm building, and I know when I start a project, what we're going to end up with, whether it's a Ridler car or a everyday driver. But I've been fortunate enough to pick out the shops that could execute what I wanted, and that has really gotten easier over the years because of technology, metal technology, and parts availability. That's a big thing. Like, pick up the phone, call the RoadsterShop, and get a chassis to start with. But uh, used to, you'd go to the junkyard and get a Corvair front end to start with, and take it to a guy and say, I want this front end put under this car. But it's a character assessment, I guess. And I visit a shop no more than 3 times before we work a deal out. Dave Lane, he and I worked the deal out sitting under a shade tree to Street Rod National. The first car he built for me, we were parked next to one another up in Louisville, Kentucky. Troy and I met at the Detroit Autorama, where he had a car going for the Ridler, and I had a car going for the Ridler. And I won. His car was prettier. Troy was a nice loser. And
that's probably the last time for Troy.
Yeah. We ended up going on a hot rod power tour, and in June after the Detroit Autorama, and we were able to visit with one another every night at the motel parking lot, and we worked a deal out on the way cross country to build the first car that I really consider big would be a 54 Plymouth that Troy built me with Chip Foos's help, and uh, it it was really the cutting edge of cars back then that they call the sniper. And Troy was able to pull off what I wanted to pull off, and Chip had designed the thing, years in advance. And, Bobby Walden, we employed him to do a lot of the sheet metal work. Troy was working out of a one car garage. His dad owned a truck repair shop, and Troy was working out of one room there when he built that car. And that now set off a long chain of cars from Troy and friendship with him and his father. His father ended up being more like a brother to me than I never had a brother, but he ended up being like a brother to me. Some of the builders, like Donnie, I never met his father. I never met Dave's father. But Dave was a computer guy that had never built a car for a customer. He built me the first car he ever built in his backyard. He went full time building cars while he was building a car for me. Donnie went full time building cars when he was building a car for me. Troy was a full time builder, but he he was very basic back then. He did most of the work, but I like to deal with a builder like that knows how to do the work. I don't ask if they do all the work on it, but I like to see them dirty at the end of the day if you're building a car.
Yeah, that's a long list. I hope everybody's listening to how many people and the big names that he just talked about through that. It's wild. You before we get off into the land speed racing on the show car side of things, you named some pretty iconic cars and pretty iconic builders, but it doesn't seem like you get very nostalgic about the cars once they're built and they've done their job. You've sold, I mean, countless cars. Um, is is it more about the process and the fun creating it and then doing it what it needs to do for that 1 year or going to the show than it is about the car itself? We've talked about this before with other customers, that they enjoy the process so much and then they're ready to do the next one. Talk about that, about why you sell some cars, why you don't sell others, and what you don't keep
Well,
everything.
the bottom line is it doesn't matter what it is, it's still a car. And a car should be built to enjoy. I'm as much on the wagon train of anybody winning awards. I've never placed a lot of emphasis on awards. Most of the awards I've ever won is I've gotten into because of the builder. It was their dream to win the Ridler or the Grand National Roadster Show, and it basically makes their life, as far as from a business standpoint, to have the kind of hardware that comes with winning car shows. But I've always looked at a car as a car. I could take it or leave it. I never look at anything and try to pick out the bad parts of the car. I look at one and try to pick out the good parts. And it part of it is the competitiveness, and I love building. I love uh, seeing something started and completed to the end. And uh, you can't. A car is going to get old. It doesn't matter how many trophies it's won. And I just have never gotten emotionally attached to anything that I've built. I've got a couple of cars that I built back when I was doing a lot of the work on them, and I've got a couple of cars like the ones y'all built me that I'm a little bit attached to, but uh, it's a car. It's not life and death. these, cars you see at car shows with stanchions around them and don't touch, paint. I've never been that kind of person. Anything I've ever built, I've built it for people to look at and enjoy. And I just don't get, emotionally attached to a piece of metal like that, because it don't matter how great it is, somebody else is going to build one better.
Do you feel the same way about those John Deeres in that other building up on the hill?
I like the John Deeres. I have one John Deere I'll die with.
It's funny how that.
Yeah.
Well, buying a John Deere tractor back when I was plowing my grandmother's garden with a mule was, that was a dream of mine that I finally was able to make come true. And you don't have to put a lot of money in a John Deere tractor. It really ain't worth selling. But there's some that are, but I never built real high dollar tractors. The only tractors I ever built was ones that I saw when I was growing up that my neighbors owned. I was in a museum the other day out in Texas that I saw a 48 Ferguson tractor like I drove when I was growing up on a farm. That's the only one I've ever seen that looked like the one that I learned to drive a tractor on. But the cars, I don't know. I guess I don't. I sell them because they're sitting and not getting driven, and somebody, the biggest majority of the people that would buy a car from me are the ones that are buying the reputation of it, or buying it to resale. And I've always been, fairly realistic in how much money you got to put into a car to sell it, and fairly realistic for what it'll bring when you get ready to sell it. So, I don't get a car that you put a price on it that ain't nobody going to pay, because they just don't, you don't resell them for what you build them. And I've always placed a lot of value in how much fun you have in a vehicle like that. And it's worth something to you just from a fun factor. Everything is not dollars and cents in a car. But I I don't get attached to them. I like building them. I like working with the kids that I've worked with. I like the people that you meet when you go to a car event. But I've built cars for specific awards, but 99% of the time, that's been because the builder wanted to do that, not me. And I don't know, from where I came from and where I've ended up, I've got enough satisfaction out of life. I don't need another trophy to prove how great you are.
But if you're gonna go for the trophy, you want to win the trophy, right? And the greatest, we've talked about this before.
That's the greatest quote
The
I've ever heard
greatest
in my life.
quote that we've ever heard was,
I'll never forget that.
Yeah,
That might be on my tombstone. When
I really think
when you bury me, I might, and it'll have George Poteet under it.
I don't care anything about winning, but I hate to lose.
I hate to lose. Winning is not near as important as not losing.
Yeah.
If you're going to do something, you do it 100% to succeed in it. And once you do that, you put it aside and go to the next goal. And it's worked out pretty well for me in business and my private life, and the hobby that I've chosen to participate in all my life. And I've been competitive all my life, high school, college, all the way through my life, and right down to getting up at 4 every morning, 50 years going to work. You want to win. You don't want to lose what you've got. But after you win an award, the next morning you get up, it's over with. You move on to the next thing you're doing, or the next dream that you have. And some of the I guess best looking cars I've ever built have been dreamed up on the way home from a car show. Me driving back by myself, just thinking about things. And you end up doing some things in your life to go with the norm. Uh, Things like Gray Baskerville and his 32 Roadster. I mean, you always dream about a car like that, and every time you see it, you say, I want to build one of those one of these days. And a guy like Gray that drove his car, you say, I want to grow up to be like him. And a guy like him, I don't know that he ever won an award with a car. I know one time they wouldn't let him in the LA Roadster show in his car because it had some primer paint on it. But it's you have different takes on what to do, and I've never really tried to outspend anybody on a car. I have outspent some people on a car. I'll acknowledge that, but that was never my goal. And I don't buy the the position that if you spend enough money on it, you can do it. I don't always get it. You got to work with a group of people like y'all, like Troy, that have the same goals that you have, and you gotta work with people that want to do the things that you're wanting to do. I don't want to have a car built in a shop where the guy hates coming to work every day. And it's really not about trophies. It's not about the oohs and the ahs and the magazines, and it's about a lot of self satisfaction and the competitiveness in you, and not wanting to lose. It's just not about winning. It's about not losing.
Well, transitioning a little bit right off of that, where did the land speed, Bonneville, Salt Flats, hey, we're going to go racing? What was the first car? And you mentioned reading in Hot Rod Magazine about it. So when did you get to that point where you said, I'm going to go Salt Flats racing?
Well, in 65, 66, back when Craig Ridler was running at Spirit of America, Mickey Thompson was running a Challenger, a Streamliner. Hot Rod covered Bonneville every year, big time back then. And of course, the biggest car that you wanted, that you could dream of having back then, would have been some sort of a Roadster. And that was everybody's dream, to drive a 32 Ford down the Salt at 150 miles an hour. And I never could afford to build a car like that till I guess I was over 30 years old. And at that point, I got to go out there with a buddy of mine. It's in the Street Rod Club that I'm here. He runs a 30 Roadster with a flathead in it, and he set a record with that car out there at about 150 miles an hour, and I was just struck with it and wanted to do it. I went as a spectator 4 years, and then we were going on a cross country tour with the Rod and Custom magazine, and Dave and I were out there, and the 32 Roadster that he built me, I was driving around on the Salt like, this Salt ain't gonna hurt this car, but it did. But I decided I wanted to race, so I bought a 26 model Roadster with a flathead in it and a C4 out there in the starting line. Had a for sale sign on it. Knew nothing about the classes. Knew nothing about the rules and regulations that you had to go by. But I joined SCTA, and got one of the rule books, and I ran that little old car for 4 years with that flathead C4. I never got it to 120 miles an hour, but 118 was the most I could ever get out of it. But the first thing you do out there is you want to see the salt. Everybody ought to see the salt, at least once in their life if they care anything about a car and history, of racing on a car. And once you see it, you think you'd like to do it. So, one of the biggest thrills you have then is just buckling yourself in and seeing the race course on the other end as a participant. And then you get to thinking about you want to go fast. Well, everybody's dream, back even now really is to go 200 miles an hour. So, then after you get a car and make a year or two racing in it, I'd like to have a car go 200 miles an hour. I bought a 32 Roadster that would barely do 200, and the problem with it, I was running on a class that 216 was a record, and you realize, after 2 years of that, I ain't gonna get this car fast enough, and then I built a 32 Roadster that I was running to like a 230 record, and I got that car up to 118 one time, and I had a good tailwind, and I made my mind up. I ain't gonna get that 230 record in this car. So while I was in line out there with that 32 that I bought, Ron Main approached me with, you need to drive the Streamliner, and I'm thinking, man, I ain't getting in that car. Look at it. I can't drive that thing. But he convinced me that it was easy to drive, and he had run a little Chevrolet 4-cylinder Ecotec motor in it, and kind of went broke doing it. And we made a deal for me to provide the engine and part of the expenses, and he'd own the car and I'd drive it. And that's the reason, this car here behind me, it's got Poteet and Main on it. I promised Ron when I end up buying the outfit from him, the operation from it, I'd always leave his name on the car as long as I ran it. And I honored that promise, and it's still sitting back here with his name on it. But I was very, very fortunate, to be smart enough to not try to build a big project fast car right out of the block. I was content with taking that 120 mile an hour Roadster and playing with it and having fun, and never got disgruntled with a car. Never got disgruntled with any of the rules or anything that you have to follow out there. All I got disgruntled with is I ain't ever gonna get as fast as I want to go in this car. So I went through a succession of cars like that. Got 232 Roadsters and the 26 model modified Roadster. And Troy and I had built that Sniper, and we were at some grand opening up there at his shop with the dang car cover coming off of it and a balloon and all that crap falling out of the ceiling. Tom Gale who worked for Chrysler at that time, had came up to Troy and I and talking about building a car for racing. He didn't specifically say Bonneville, but somehow we worked out a deal. Mopar had worked out a deal with me and Troy on the Sniper that when we built it, they donated a new Viper car back the second year that they'd been building those things. One of the employees had run into a Wendy's drive-through with it, and they ended up donating that car to us, for us to take anything off of it that we wanted. But we had to bring the car back when we got through taking the parts off of it. it was never a licensed legal car, so they had to crush it legally. But Troy, Troy and I, when we got through, we took it back to him, the roof in 2/4 pounds.
Did he
And they
UPS
took
it to
and
him?
crushed it. But in building that car and meeting Dave Gale, we worked out a deal that Mopar had some knowledge back then that really nobody else had and didn't really realize they had it. They had a 4-cylinder block that was running in the USAC midget cars. 4-cylinder aluminum block, little car, but it would take one Hemi head. That's all it, it bolt right onto it. The Hemi head, 426 Hemi, one head would. So he worked out a deal for them to help us out with that car a little bit with the engine on it. And we got a Plymouth engine to go on a car. What we're going to do? This same guy I went to Baltimore with back years ago had a 68 Barracuda sitting in his garage that his wife had bought new that they had parked years ago. And I said, Barracuda looked like a very aerodynamic car, and it ought to work. So we worked out the deal with Chrysler. We worked out the deal with Paul Cosma for him to donate that Barracuda to the project. And I took it up there to Troy and said, "This is what I want to run. I want to get a 200-mile-an-hour club." And Troy took the challenge. He'd never even been to Baltimore. Actually, he didn't know what 68 Plymouth Barracuda looked like. Troy's had some funny things with me, but I took that Plymouth up there, and I really didn't give him a lot of guidance on what I wanted to do, the class I wanted to run. All I wanted to know is I want to go 200. I want to get a 200 record. I didn't want to drive 200. I'd already been there in my Roadster. I wanted a 200 record. With a 200 record, you get your name in a book for the rest of your life, and you get a red cap to wear, in the casket that you're buried in. But Troy, Bill, I went back up there, 6 months later, and he's built the god awfulest looking comp coupe that's ever been built at that time. And a comp coupe car like he built me, I have the flexibility to do anything you want to do the front end of the car. You can run wing on the back. You have to chop it. It's got rules like that. But he read the rule book, in a way that he built that 68 Barracuda back then that was, it was cutting edge. I mean, it is today. We still run it today. But we took that thing up to Mopar and put it in their wind tunnel. And the way he built it, it had less drag on it than a new Corvette did. And it was just unbelievable at the numbers that they got out of it. We spent 8 hours up there one night. We had to go in after midnight. We had to slip in there. But when you go in their development center up there, you have to turn your cell phones into them. You can't do nothing but walk in a straight line and not look side to side or nothing. You walk down the hallway, there's NASCAR sitting there, there's NAS trucks sitting there, there's dragsters sitting there. But Troy was able to build that car, and after the wind tunnel, make a few adjustments to it. That we went to Baltimore running in an F class with a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, which the limit there is 82 cubic inches, and we were running 180 cubic inch turbocharged Mopar with an aluminum block that was originally designed for midget racing. And with that 426 Hemi head, it looked awesome. But we'd run into a 236 record, and my shakedown run, we went 255.
Wow.
That's moving.
Now, SCDA wasn't happy with us. But
Damn.
we went on, and I've run that car. I was running it when Ron taught me into building a 4-cylinder. So I ended up out there that year in 2 cars. I had the Barracuda that I'd run, and I'd go back to the start line and get in the Streamliner. And running the Streamliner, I was running a little 122 cubic inch Ecotech motor of a HHR in it that Chevrolet had been racing out there. And Ron convinced me that I could get in the 2 club with it. So I was running both of them out there that first year, and I was able that year to set a 326 record in that 122 cubic inch class. It's still running the Elf blown Streamliner class, which I've still got the record on the books out there for that class. But we ran we ended up with a 326 record and ended up with a 255 record with the Barracuda, and went to the SCTA banquet and got my 3 club hat and my 2 club hat at the same time, which is
That's the way to
pretty
do it.
rare out there. Yeah.
How many?
But
How many
over the
people?
year,
Go ahead.
how many what?
How many people have gotten their red cap in the Blowfish? You've put a lot of people behind the wheel of that.
Well, I've let there's been 2 other people that got a red cap in it, and 2 other people got a blue cap in it. We actually set a 3 record in that car. Danny Burrow did. He actually made a 315 pass for that car one time. I ran it 302 or something like that. I got I guess the biggest record I got in that car was 297, and that was with a small block engine running gas. But we run it several different classifications, 5, 6, 7 different classes. But the biggest thing I guess I've done out there at Bonneville, 32 Roadster that I built, which is one that's sitting behind me here. I probably had 15 people drive that car 200 miles an hour. They never set a record with it, but people like Rick Love, the John up at Classic Instruments, people that work for me in my shop, I would take them out there and let them drive the 32 Roadster and let them go 200 miles an hour. But I've had 15 people get in the go 200 in that car, and then a couple of years ago, I sold it to a guy out there who was wanting a car for his grandson. I sold it to him for $5 with the understanding that when his grandson outgrew it, I could get it back for $5, which I did, and I still have his $5 in my pocket. I never paid him. There it is. He died on us, but I repaid him a little bit. I hate to admit this, but I did have his ashes in one of my parachutes that was over 400 mile an hour pass that I spread out there, which ain't really supposed to be done. But
Wow.
The 32 Roadster is the one that I loaned out many times to different people, either to go out there with us and race, or to just loan it to them for a year to race out there. And the Streamliner that I bought from Ron, we ended up running. I never ran anything but a small block in that car, but I ended up making a 462 pass in that car with a 300 cubic inch motor in it. And I crashed it out there. The speedometers, shows, I had a camera over my shoulder looking, and the speedometer shows 370 when I got upside down in it. But this is it sitting behind me here. They gathered up all the pieces out there. I don't have anything that you could save anything, but we put it back together and glued all the panels back together where they're supposed to be. And this car has been over 430 times with that nothing bigger than 378 cubic inches. I think it's the biggest engine I've ever run in that car. But we've done it. I've had a lot of help out there. I've had some really, really good people, on my team. Uh, I've been fortunate with working with some of the people out there with SCTA, Mike Cook running world records FIA, renting the place out there and running it, him taking care of it for us. But uh, I was very fortunate with that car, and starting with that 122 cubic inch engine in it, I was able to learn how to drive it without being in what we would consider today not a lot of danger. I mean, 300, 60, 370 miles an hour is dangerous. But when I was making passes with that four-cylinder engine out there, 122 cubic inches, you ain't gonna go very fast. But one we were able to get it up to 356 one time, and it's real easy to drive. It doesn't lose traction. It goes straight. The thing is 38 feet long, and all you have to do is sit in there like you're in a rocking chair and change the gears. But as you get a little bit more ambitious, and we end up, they convinced me that we could put a V8 in it and go faster. And Kenny Duttweiler does the engine for me. He had worked on GM Grand National Buick with that V6 turbocharged engine when they first came out, and he is really good with turbo engines. He still is, but he convinced me he could put me in a 3 club with it. And then after we got to running, he convinced me he could put me. We didn't have a 4 club back then, but he convinced me we could go 4 miles an hour with a small block engine in it. And like I say, I ran that 300 cubic inch engine up to 462 one time out there on an FIA course. But Kenny he has stayed way ahead of the curve from a technology standpoint, and from a loyalty standpoint to me. He never goes to bed. He thinks about it 24 hours a day, and he still builds my engine for me. And when I crashed this car, uh, SCTA decertified the chassis because it was old, and it was a pretty bad crash. They were afraid it hurt the integrity of the bill. But I got convinced by Steve Watt to build a new car. He told me what he could build me a new car for, and I knew real quick if we could do it for that I would spend the money that it would take to build it. But we basically built the same car that we crashed, other than we made it a little bit wider to where we could wedge a big block down in the frame rails and get the headers and everything, the turbocharger to clear the chassis. But we run a LS motor in it out there. We run the fastest LS motors ever run out there. I run the fastest small block that's ever run out there. I run the fastest 4-cylinder that's ever run out there. I run the fastest big block that's ever been run out there. I run the fastest Streamliner that's ever been run out there. I got the biggest record that's ever been set out there on a 5-mile course, and well, a piston-driven car. That they used to run jet cars out there, which they don't do that anymore. But we ended up setting a record a couple of years ago, 470 miles an hour, which at the time I was running on a 417 record. I was running on a record on a AA blown fuel Streamliner that had 2 blown Hemis in it that Tom Berkeley had said it 4 or 5 years before me at an FIA meet. But we were running on a 417 record, and we bumped it up to 470 out there on one Thursday morning.
That's a good jump.
But I set in that thing on one pass out there that week at 481, and the issue that we have with it is we built the same car that we're running a 4-cylinder. So we got a 2-wheel drive car, which, you can't go that fast with a 2-wheel drive car. You got to have all-wheel drive. You could go really fast in a car out there. That's what everybody tells me. But uh, we didn't build it to go 500, but we're real close to getting there. And I don't know if we'll ever get there or not. I don't know if I will. I'm about worn out. I'm old. I'm 75 years old. I don't know how many more passes I got in me out there. But it the racing started with Hot Rod Magazine and and Craig Breedlove running that Spirit of America out there off the end of the course, end of the lake out there, and him sitting on the tail waiting on the rescue team to come pick him up. But all you could see is the tail of the car sticking out of the water, and the Spirit of America. And hearing his quote, if Petrelli didn't get a good time on that, I'm going to kill him and kill him. And Petrelli was the guy that was in charge. Dave Petrelli's father was actually doing it, but he was in charge of the FIA meet out there when he did it. But I've had since then, I've had Craig in my pits over a couple of years, and he's still going. He's still dreaming about building race cars. He's still dreaming about going to over the 750 land speed record with a jet car. But Craig's like me; he's a little too old to be thinking about doing that. But it started with him crashing the Spirit of America, and it being in the picture Hot Rod Magazine back in 63, 64. And, my racing career started with watching Paul run that flathead Roadster out there and said I'd like to do that. And, again, I was wise enough to buy a car instead of building one and building, buying what I could afford to run and still have fun with it, and what I could physically handle, because I'd never driven a car, a race car like that, other than on a drag strip going 88 miles an hour on a 65 Mustang or something. But to run Bonneville, the biggest mistake you make is going big too early. You need to learn how to have fun out there before you get out there and start really, really racing and competing for trophies that people, they work the whole life to get a trophy out there. And you can't just say, well, I'm going to break that record. It ain't that easy. And I see people today that just spend, bukus of money on a car, and their goal is, to, like run 300 miles an hour on a 256 record. And you just have to say, Paul, that ain't going to happen. You need to go for the 256 record before you think about going 300. and I've been guilty a little bit of being a bad influence on some of the people that do that. I know people that built cars that made up their mind they were going to go faster than us. But the problem with it is, they didn't do the homework to do it, and most people today that has never been out there a lot pick the wrong class car to build. They most everybody picks what they like to dream about owning and having. Like me, I wanted a 32 Roadster, the worst car you can build to run out there. Don't ever build a 32 Roadster to run out there. And it's not because it's a bad car, it's because the records are so high, that it takes you 50 years to learn how to drive a car like that fast. And they, one of them out there run a 32 Roadster 302 miles an hour. And, I couldn't drive a 32 Roadster 302 miles an hour. I'm over 400 close to 60 times. I wouldn't get on a 32 Ford and try to drive at 300 miles an hour. And there's people that'll say, well, I'm going to go faster than that. And I'm thinking, boy, good luck on that. But I was fortunate enough to drive what's considered today low horsepower cars that are easy to drive. And when you're driving, a 4-cylinder engine with 800 horsepower out there, it's like riding a motor scooter or electric scooter down the street. In a city, it's not hard. And you graduate to bigger things and faster things, and it gets harder. The harder, you have different plateaus you reach out there. Going 300, when I hit 300, it really wasn't that hard. I'm thinking Ron was right. I could drive this car. I'd say after I'd made a 326 pass in it, but you got, you get up to 375, and then you try and try and try to get 400, and you just can't hardly do it. You're making 380 passes, 387. You just can't get to 400. And then once you get experience, and your crew gets experience, and you figure out what you can and can't do with horsepower and traction and aerodynamics, you finally reached the 400. The first 400 record I ever had out there was 402, and they SCTA formed a 400 club out there right after I'd made that 402 record. I'm sitting there with the smallest 400 record on the books out there, and of course it was a D class, which is a very small engine out there, but I was ashamed to wear the black cap of those guys that had 415, 420 records. I was ashamed to wear the black cap with them. I never wore a 404 record black cap, but or you get enough passes on you, and you know what you can do and can't do, and even with the 300 cubic inch engine that I set that 402 record with, 404 record. I've got the world's fastest piston driven cars, international record of 439 with it. And I don't know. I don't know that anybody will ever break that record. First, you got to have a longer course than we have out there at SCTA meeting. The salt has shrunk so much. I don't think we can get an 11-mile course out there. And it's harder to get because you have to make 2 passes and you have to turn around in 1 hour. Go over the same real estate in opposite directions in 1 hour, and it's really hard to do. But the 439 record with that 300 cubic inch engine is probably the biggest record I've got out there, even though I got a 470 record out there. But the 439 record is a lot harder to get than that 470 record is. But I've been, so far, after about 25 years of doing this, I've never had a record broken out there in the Streamliner class that we've set. I got the AA, the A, the B, the C, the D, the L.
It's the whole alphabet. Sounds like
you're getting pretty good at not losing.
I call it the alphabet car.
What's the biggest limiting factor out there to, breaking those records? Is it horsepower? Is it traction? Is it aerodynamics? Is it length of the course?
The biggest problem is traction, and it's a 5-mile drag race, and you can, anybody like Kenny can create horsepower. We've got a big block engine now. We can make 3,800 horsepower with it if you turn the boost up, but you can't do that because the tires won't hold out there. You're running on, what's equivalent to concrete that's got a loose mix on top of it, and you're running land speed racing tires, which doesn't have about 3 inches of contact on the surface of the salt. Less than that when you're going down the course doing 400 miles an hour, your tires grow like the top fuel dragster cars do, and you end up just a very small area in the center of the tire that's touching the salt. But the traction is the limiting factor with us right now, and part of the problem is what I talked about a while ago a little bit. I got a 2-wheel drive car, And of course, when I was building it, Steve told me what he could build it for. And, I have to be a little bit realistic about how much money I'm going to spend on a project. I said I can afford that. And people that run out there, and I would say the same thing today to somebody. Why don't you build a 4-wheel drive car? And my answer to that is I don't want to spend $3 million on a race car. If I could spend $3 million on a race car, we could go 500, but it would have to be an all-wheel drive car. And the reason for that is traction. Another big factor, guys, on the traction is what God does to it out there in the wintertime. We go out there sometimes and it's like driving on an expressway. And then sometimes, like the year that I crashed, it's wet and it's real slippery, and you can't get traction regardless of what you do. But we've had a couple of years out there that the course was just absolutely perfect, like running on a concrete expressway. And then I run out there on some courses that I look back now and said I shouldn't have been out there. I shouldn't have been running that car out there. The year I crashed, the course was just absolutely unbelievably bad. And year before last, it was really good. But the year that I made the 480 pass out there, that the salt wasn't real good. And I don't really know why we went that fast. We wasn't expecting to go that fast. And then to turn around the next day and go faster was a bigger challenge. But the biggest problem is traction. It ain't horsepower. These guys today with computers and fuel and technology that we use, you make horsepower. But driving a car like that I have out there, a Streamliner, the best range of horsepower is from 1,824 horses. And I love driving a car that's got 1,850, 1,900 horses. I don't have near as much fun in a car with 3,000 horsepower because you have a lot of issues issues with going straight. But with a little 2,000 horsepower engine, you just kind of sit there and wait for the 5-mile marker, and going 400 miles an hour, you can see the mile marker pretty clearly. At 470, I have a little problem picking up an orange flag with a number on it. So you have to be real careful about how far you go and when you pull your parachutes and things. And last couple of years with the speeds that we're going, we've had some parachute failures. I went off the end of the course out there last year before last. It rained us out last year. But the best racing out there and the most fun racing out there is anywhere from 1,800 to 2,200 horsepower.
What's the highest mile an hour where you still are breaking traction at?
How many? What?
Like, are you losing traction? Are you spinning the tires at 250 plus mile an hour? Like when you're trying for a fast pass?
It spans the whole 5 miles when you're going 35-mile marker. If you've got a decent run, I'm spinning the tires. The year I crashed going 370, I spun out in 6th gear. I was in 6th gear going 370, and it just lost traction and spun sideways like you do on a slick highway. But you spin the tires, and with the tires that we have, the rubber is real thin, and you spin down to the cords, pretty quickly. So, every pass I make, I ruin 2 rear tires, and we have tire issues out there. Goodyear's ended up owning Mickey Thompson, so they're building they're not going to build a 500 mile an hour land speed tire. They tell me they don't want the liability of it. I ended up buying 28 tires that was in inventory with the Mickey Thompson 31-inch tires that we run, just because you couldn't buy them anymore. But I ruined 2 tires every pass we make out there, and it's because of spinning. And you run 3,000 horsepower on a surface like we're running, and if it's got any moisture at all in it, it's just horrible.
What was scarier, 481 on the tires or 370 in the air?
Well, it was harder with the 480 pass because the course was bad and I was having to drive real hard. The 370 pass, we weren't out there competing. We were out there just testing an LS engine. And I wasn't under a lot of stress as far as, I got to set this record. It really didn't affect me much other than I was stupid for being there and with the course as wet as it was. But we weren't trying to go 500 miles an hour. We were trying to see how our technology that we'd put into the car that year was working. And it was an FIA meet. There wasn't but 2 cars out there running. So the 370 pass wasn't as bad as the 480 pass. The 480 pass, the course wasn't good. It was really rough. And I had to drive the car from side to side. I'm running on a 30-mile wide racetrack. And when you run up and down the salt like that, cars going down it will end up breaking the salt up and creating soft spots in the salt or a pothole somewhere. So you get on the starting line, you've got the starter telling you, you got a bump down there at the 3.25-mile marker. You need to be on the right hand side of the track, and then you need to move over to the left hand side for the next mile and a quarter, and then you got to move over to the right hand side. So, when you're going 450 miles an hour, it's hard to think about that, and it's hard to steer the car because it first it's going so fast, the front end gets light on it, so you don't have a lot of traction with your front tires when you turn them. They're just, there's not that much downforce on them going that fast. So when you turn the steering wheel, you don't really get a quick reaction like you do dodging a pothole or a dead coon on the highway or something. You have to anticipate where you're going to go. And when you see that you're moving a little bit too far to one side of the course, you have to anticipate pretty quick because we're going a quarter of a mile in 2 seconds. I'm doing less than 8 seconds in a mile. So, you got quarter mile markers out there and you're looking at a quarter mile marker and you see the next one coming up. It's going to be there in 2 seconds. If you want to move to the left a little bit there, you got to do it right then. And the 480 pass was a lot harder than the 370 crash. And at the 370 crash, it never really bothered me other than, when I went sideways, I tried to pull the parachute to get it back straight and my canopy flew off. And at that point, I knew that I was sideways and the body was coming off the frame. And I basically, said, I got to keep my hands in the cockpit. You got arm restraints on everything, but you still, don't want your arms flinging around outside the cage or anything. So I basically just grabbed the steering wheel and sat there till it stopped rolling. And I unhooked the seat belt. I was laying on the side. I unhooked the seat, took the steering wheel off of it, unhooked the seat belt, fell to the ground. And the funniest thing I think I've ever heard is by that time my recovery truck had shown up and got there. And this one old boy is with us. He don't go out there with us every year. And the first thing he said, he's alive.
That made you feel good.
But he was so excited that I was alive. I'm thinking, it wasn't that bad.
How many times did it roll? I've heard the story from Danny, so I don't know that I believe much of it, but
I don't have any idea. We didn't have, I was far enough out on the course there with any videos or anything. The only videos I have is one that was inside the car with me. And it rolled on both sides, 3 or 4 or 5 times, and then spun around and rolled on the other side. It's spinning, like throwing a pencil on the floor, really, what it was like. But it really didn't bother me. The wreck didn't. They made me go to the hospital, and I went back out there the next day and got my stuff together and flew home the next day. But I didn't really have any effects of the race. I mean, it fractured my back and broke some ribs. I didn't get a concussion or anything, which is a
No real
miracle.
effects then, right?
Yeah,
You can walk those off.
It actually broke the driving helmet I had on. It busted it, but we didn't worry about concussions back then like we do now. But I didn't get a concussion or anything, but it didn't hurt. I was sore a little bit for a couple 3 weeks, but driving fast on a wet course is about the worst experience you can have out there. And I've driven on some courses out there that I look at it now and say that was really stupid for us to do that. But you get out there and you get into this competitive stage that we get into, and you think, well, I can do it. You get it started and you get me pushed off, I'll drive it. That's my position when I get out there. I drive any course, any speed that you make it go, I'll drive it. And I've been pretty fortunate to go some pretty big speeds out there a lot of times, and not anything really bad happened to me. And I've gotten to the point though I feel like I'm pressing my luck a little bit.
Well, you're going pretty fast on the salt. You obviously like the speed. Anytime on the pavement, do you like going fast? I mean, I know you had a pretty high horsepower 56 Chevy. Do you like that kind of driving when you're on the street, or is it just the closed course?
I've never had a speeding ticket. I've never had a speeding ticket on the street, and I very, very seldom ever drive over the speed limit. And I've gotten old enough, gray hair, a blue tag hanging from the windshield, that I know people make fun of me on the expressway now. I have people pass me. I'm doing 70 miles an hour, and they're zipping by me doing 75 or 80, and I'm thinking, man, they must hate me. It's like we used to call them blue tags when I was growing up. That I'm just an old blue tag going down the expressway.
They don't know they're passing the fastest man on the planet.
And these kids today in town, when you're on 45 mile an hour speed limit street, these kids don't want to go that fast. And if you're in their way, they're on your bumper. They're about 3 inches off your rear bumper. So I get a lot of tailgating right now. I don't drive very fast.
You got to get a sticker on the back of your cars. My other car does 480 miles an hour.
Well, I had a license plate one time on one of them. It said 462 mph. Of course, nobody
People
really
are just
understands
scratching their heads.
I know you haven't gotten a speeding ticket. However, I do know you've got some roads on your property that are long enough. I've seen some pictures and some videos of that green 56 gasser doing some pretty good pulls and some burnouts and stuff. It seems like you if as long as it's on private roads, you have no problem with letting it eat.
Well, yeah, I've been a bad influence on two of my grandsons. Every time they get in a car, it's the first thing they ask, Granddaddy, will it do a burnout? But I'm doing them on a private drive, and I don't do it on the highway. Don't do it at traffic lights in town. It's always on a private drive like that, to where you can, if you have one that just barely do a burnout, you can sneak around back, pour a little bit of water in there, and not tell them. That's what it takes to do a burnout. But you get questioned, what is a burnout, Granddaddy? Why is it called a burnout?
I don't think that gasser needed any help. That green gasser didn't need any help doing a burnout. It would do it.
Gasser was scared to drive. I drove that car on a drag strip a time or two, and that's the only car I've ever driven. It was relatively fast on a drag strip, but I wouldn't want to be a drag racer. I drove that car. I ran some, high sevens, low eights in it, and I ain't no way I'd drive a funny car or something like that 5 seconds. It's just, I don't know why they do it, but the gasser would definitely do a burnout.
We've kept you long enough. We just got a couple little quick questions we're going to ask. What's the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
That I could give anybody.
Well, no. Well, I'm coming to that, but I want to know what the best piece of advice that you have ever gotten from anybody.
Oh, I don't know. Probably to stay in school.
Did you listen to that advice?
When I was 15 years old, I had an English teacher that was pretty insistent that we keep coming to class when we were in high school. I mean, I graduated my high school with about 15 people, and I went to high school with one guy that made 9 on his ACT test.
He said
But
9.
the best advice I've probably gotten from anybody is to get an education, and it'll open some doors for you. And I credit a lot of that with a English teacher that kind of took me under her wing when I was young and impressionable. And Geraldine Stevens, I'll never forget her.
Well, how about the advice that you would give somebody, whether it be a guy looking to start a hot rod shop or a guy just looking to be successful in business and life? What you got? Anything you'd feed to those guys?
Well, the biggest mistake I see people make that I would advise against is spending more money than you can afford. And I'm a firm believer in, if you can't pay for it, don't buy it. I'm not a believer in our credit system here in America. I'm not a believer in instant gratification, like getting in a Streamliner when all I could afford was a $10,000 flathead Roadster. And the biggest problem we've got today with the generation of kids that are growing up, and even my generation, is people aren't afraid of credit now. And credit is a killer. If you owe somebody money, they own you. And the thing that these kids, people building their first project or building their last project, needs to keep it within their budget. And if you can't afford it, set it aside for a day or two. If you can't afford $1 million house, buy a $400,000 house and be happy with it. But I see too many people today that let credit ruin their lives, and it ain't got to do with a car or how much money you spend on it. It has to do with how much money you got to spend on a car.
That's good. Now, when you all your life with all the success you've had, when you get up in the morning and you know you're going in to face a tough day, what do you tell yourself? How do you push? How have you pushed through life to get to the level that you're at?
How do you get there? You set goals. You set incremental goals, and you feel good about yourself, regardless of where you are. There's no room inside any of our bodies for jealousy. So don't ever begrudge anybody for what they have or what they do. It doesn't matter whether you can afford it or not. You don't have to be satisfied with what you got, but you need to be happy with what you have. And whatever you have, you need to enjoy it and be happy with it, and always want to have better and more. But don't ever settle for, my favorite phrase that I hate is "that will do." When you're building a car, you never get out from underneath and say, "Well, that'll do." You got to get out from under the car and say, "That's the best I can do there." and it has to do with your personal life, your business life, your hobby, whatever you do, you can never say that will do. It's got to be that's the best that I can do.
Solid.
Yeah. I mean, there's no better ending point than that right there. That's great. We do a thing here on the podcast though, where we ask you what's in your pockets, and you've got to have at least a pocket knife in your pocket, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, George, I appreciate it. Hope to see you here soon. We haven't seen each other in a while, and
I can't imagine anybody wanting to listen to me for an hour.
Oh, you'd be surprised, George.
This was
There's
amazing.
an entire industry that'll be glued to this one.
Yeah, this was something.
Sometimes my grandkids think I'm pretty boring.
They'll know one day when they get a little older.
Yeah, maybe.
I thought we were going to have some Betty stories on here, or at least Betty make a little surprise appearance, but I haven't seen her in a while either. Well, I appreciate it.
All right. I appreciate what you guys have done for the industry and what you've done for me. And I never hesitate recommending y'all in your shop, and Jeremy, Phil, Josh. Y'all are right at the top of the chart with character and being genuine about everything and unpretentious. You're I don't care how successful you've been, and y'all been pretty successful with this car deal. You don't really show it, and you're always the same people when I see you at around these events. And I hope you are able to maintain that the rest of your life and die happy, man. Don't worry about what you didn't get in life. Be real thankful for what you were able to accomplish and you did get.
Well, I appreciate that, George, and having role models like you, it makes it pretty easy.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
Okay.
See you soon.
Take care, George.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pretty unbelievable guy.
Even like everything we have to add after this is like
useless.
Yeah, pretty dumb.
Yeah, we should probably just end it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was hard to even like come up with a reply to half the stuff he was saying. You're just like
mind-blowing.
and yeah.
Yeah, honestly,
okay.
like throughout that whole thing, I was just a listener.
Yeah.
I didn't really feel the need. This wasn't a podcast. This was just George Poteet.
And you could, I mean, we could do this again 5 more times. And there's so many, like everything he's saying, there's a nugget of advice. You're like, oh yeah. And it applies to everything, even beyond what we're doing. I mean, just in life.
Yeah. Anytime George isn't a real outspoken guy, so this was quite a privilege.
Yeah.
But when he does talk,
you better listen.
It's time to listen.
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely twisted his arm. He doesn't do these types of things that much. He did it as a favor to us. And I mean, good grief. So much gold there. It's such a good guy.
Love a guy.
It was quite the different. The 480 on the wheels was harder than the 370 in the air. That's just like, wow.
He
Big
danced
thanks.
around that for a while. I was waiting for him to get into it. Yeah, I crashed at 370. And
yeah. Big thanks again to George. Remember, you can learn more about him and the Speed Demon by visiting their website at speeddemon715.com. You can also follow the Speed Demon race team on Instagram. They're posting a lot of really cool stuff, some facts and great pictures, awesome photography at Speed Demon Racing Team. All right. Do we want to go through?
I'm still like,
I know,
digesting it all.
I know.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah. We've got
almost brought a tear to my eye for a little bit there,
Yeah.
I was getting a little choked up when it was
yeah.
Hell of a guy.
Yeah. Like it's a different vibe now. Like I don't know how we'd go through, and talk about. We've got the glove box and we've got a Hall of Fame.
Well, let's dive into the Hall of Fame because the Hall of Fame has got a a lot
Yeah.
to do with George. So.
Absolutely. So we're going to roll right into the Roadster Shop Hall of Fame. This is a special Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame is obviously talking about some of the iconic builds for whatever rhyme or reason. They could be an award or a great customer, or just an awesome build. And this one falls right there in there with that. And so this week we have perfect timing. Obviously, we have the '69 Camaro Survivor Series build for George, the very first car we ever built for George.
Yeah, I think it was his first muscle car, too, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. First foray in from the street rods into a muscle car. It was there's so much to that build. It's seemingly so simple. People look at it like, oh great, Camaro.
Yeah, at a glance, it's a simple car, but there's an awful lot to make it that simple. Yeah, that was
Josh started it off writing a check that your ass had to cash.
Yeah, that's why we make a good team. That's why we're all, a good team, because, Josh went out there and, Josh is the personality, as everybody who listens to this podcast knows. And, Josh and George, built a great relationship, and Josh had a discussion with George and found the opportunity where George wanted a muscle car, wanted one quick, and so Josh promised that to him.
Yeah, we were at Goodguys in Nashville, and George and Josh were talking. Then he came up to me afterwards. Josh says we're going to build this car by Columbus. Anybody in like Hot Rod Show calendar knows the time frame from Goodguys Nashville to Goodguys Columbus, and it always comes up way quicker than the 5.
Was that 8 weeks?
5 weeks.
6 weeks?
It was a total of 6, but we didn't have the car yet.
Okay.
So yeah, George asked me, "You sure you can do it?" And the time frame didn't register with me at first. I'm like, "Yeah, we'll make it happen." That spec chassis is a bolt on. It's a pretty easy deal. There's not a lot of fabrication. When are you going to get the car to us? And then George like, "Oh, we'll have it to you next week." Yeah, no problem. We could probably make that happen. And then me and Josh started talking. We're like, "Dude, fucking Columbus is in 6 weeks."
I will say now, I feel about you guys like I would a brother. I don't have a brother, but I treat you both like brothers. I feel that I am the third brother, the older, better looking one, obviously.
Older for sure,
right?
Or distinguished.
Yeah.
Right.
You and I've said this before. For many reasons, I feel like a brother because if you were friends, you'd be way nicer,
Yes.
right? Than you are. So I have to take it as I'm like a brother.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
just keep telling
right,
yourself.
You're good.
Right?
Yeah. You're in a happy place. Let's just keep moving forward.
It's a sweet spot.
The beauty of our friendship, our relationship, the working relationship, everything that we have done for 12, 13 years of being friends and working here for the last 6 whatever years, I can write checks knowing that they can be cashed.
Yeah, right.
And there's a mutual respect of knowing that I'm not going to write a check figuratively that's too big to be cashed.
Sure.
And with that, you were not at Nashville that year.
I was not.
I did make a phone call, in the midst of this conversation to a little preemptive, like, hey, this is the deal. Can this be done? What do we have to do to get this happening? So that was, I didn't fully write it without checking the balance. I at least called the bank and was like, hey, how much do I got in there before I do this?
On that note, do you think all these compliments are like buying you further goodwill?
No,
Or
I know that as
you
soon
think
as
he's
we get
gonna
off,
fucking
he's going to tell
shred
me
you
how
up?
I did something stupid and I looked in it like an idiot.
Yeah.
And I
No,
get
we're
it.
not going there right now. When you call, there wasn't an ounce of doubt.
No.
I just simply said, hell yeah, well, we're gonna make it happen.
Yeah. So
it was a challenge.
we made the promise at Nashville that in 6 weeks, when Columbus Goodguys came around, we would have the Camaro there. Well, it took Danny about a week to get the car to us. So now 6 minus 1 is 5. So we've got 5 weeks once we
You're the
receive
smarter brother
Yeah.
with that math.
we received the car, we've got 5 weeks to build this car. Now, this isn't something that could ever be done again. So I don't want customers thinking about, oh, it's easy. You can do this. So there was a lot of things. We even started working prior to getting the car, obviously, to make this happen. Now,
You know, thanks to George, compliments to George, it taught us a lot about how to approach these survivor cars and how to do them efficiently and kind of change the process from just building the higher end kind of show car stuff because we had no choice but to essentially put the cart ahead of the horse because we had to get the chassis done. We had to powder coat the chassis. We had to get the exhaust in it, the tank in it. We had to separate the body from it and do all the things that needed to be done to the body before the body was mated to the chassis. So, fortunately, we have a rock star team with a ton of technology in our engineering department and being able to work off some scans and involving the engineers. There's a lot of things that can happen while the fab guys are doing their thing. So it really like kind of paved. It wasn't the first survivor car we did, but it was the first one that kind of paved the path for doing it efficiently, quickly, and finding those not necessarily shortcuts, but what would you say is we're laser cutting firewalls and
efficiencies.
efficiencies and laying out, booster assemblies and pedal assemblies and all that. And
Working smarter, not harder.
exactly.
It didn't hurt that this was a original 1969 Camaro, original paint, 21,000 original miles on it. So
Beautiful
that doesn't
car.
that doesn't hurt things. There was no hidden surprises. You hear that all the time,
Yep.
but there was none.
Yep.
But I'll say when the car came in here, the first thing that we did was not sit there and like dwell on the fact that we had a big fish on the hook, because it was no like let's buy the baddest ass LS crate motor that we can buy because this is just
Supercharging.
Yeah, let's
do
just-
this. And
right. The budget's
it's not what he wanted.
No,
I think it's a lot of listening to the customer.
right.
Yeah.
We learned a lot about how to listen to the customer and what he was looking for, and he wanted a car that he could drive. So, believe it or not, when this thing was said and done, it's probably the cheapest car we've ever built from a budget standpoint, but just a phenomenal functioning car. And I think he really enjoyed it. I mean, he got in the car, drove it
back home.
drove
from
it back
Columbus.
home from Columbus to
We
Mississippi.
drove it to Columbus.
Oh yeah, we drove it
Was-
to Columbus. I forgot
Right.
about that.
But yeah, it was I think an instrumental kind of build in like really kicking off the Survivor series. And a good looking car. I mean, it had the right look. You don't see a lot of vinyl tops on 69 Camaros. It's a love it, hate it. It worked well
Yeah.
on this car.
Simple dress up on the motor, right components.
Right.
GM LS3 crate motor.
Just a very, very functional, drivable car. And still to this day, I mean, that was what year is this, Josh? Because you're the date guy.
This would be early 2017.
Early 2017. Yeah, this car still to this day, it's the one that you can just jump in and know that like if there's nothing else ready for the road tour, like the
Yep.
69
Camaro.
for Poteet, that car's like ready. When was the oil last changed on it? We got
Yep.
It just works and drives and drives and drives and drives, and it's just an awesome.
It performs probably 3 or 4 notches above what you would expect it to perform.
Yes.
It's an anomaly.
Yes.
It's an anomaly.
We proved that going through where were we?
This was south of the Dragon Tail
Yep.
of the Dragon, wherever that was in whatever state that was.
Yep.
We were going through. That was
There are some twisties back there.
Yeah.
And I was trying to stay on your bumper, and I was
You
having
were.
quite the difficult time because that car works so well.
We had a group of probably 8 of us.
Yeah.
To start, and then there were 2.
And it was a while. Like we ended up by the time we got through that, I mean, we pulled off the road somewhere, and I mean, we must have sat there for 15 minutes
And that
waiting
was
for the rest.
that
of
was the
group to
first
show up.
time after just a long drive forget like a drag strip or race course or do anything crazy. After just a long drive, having fun, like getting out, I don't even think I shut the door. We just like come screeching to a halt and you jump out, like your heart is racing. Like there's not another high like that.
Yeah.
You were just like, one, you're like thankful to be alive because every turn was because we were neither one of us were going to lift.
Well, so and that, I mean, that's the nice thing about like, sure, it's a customer's car, right? So if something bad happened, you don't have to explain it to the customer because you're gonna fucking die, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
that's
so it's
Phil's
just
problem.
like, yeah, Phil's gonna have to be like, we'll issue you a credit, like we can duplicate it.
I was gonna say, you guys had like your heart racing out of your chest. Imagine being in the passenger seat of the Legends truck, trying to keep up with you guys.
Which
Well, Matt Saxon was driving for the first time, and you guys are doing 120, 130, and we're doing 95 to 100 in a 4-wheel drive lifted square body on 35s.
There's some obviously tremendous amount of great cars built in the time that's passed, but for some reason that car and Matt Saxton's car, it was the stars aligned at those. It's so confidence inspiring, and it's funny because every time you push it into a corner, you said, like in my mind, I'm thinking one of two things is going to happen. It's going to stick, or I'm going to die. And then it sticks, and you're like, okay.
And push it a
So
little,
push it
a little bit more in the next
So
one.
you give it a little more and you give it a little more, and every time it's just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that car always, it just like
Yeah.
sits down in the turn, digs in, and it just hooks and goes.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
But
Great car, great recipe for kind of the survivor car template. And still, to this day, it's piling miles on it.
Go back one picture there for everybody who wants to know what the car weighs.
Oh, yeah.
It's a
There you
pretty
go.
standard question.
The proof's in the pudding right there.
3382.
And look at the left front, right front.
Ooh.
Exact nines. Those are pretty good corner weights right there.
Yeah.
Which that's actually a good example of like using some restraint and building the car. And don't pile a bunch of junk in it, because that car, I mean, it was AC. It had like all your creature comforts, but nothing over the top.
George doesn't like a stereo.
Right.
No. Betty likes a stereo though.
Bobby likes a stereo.
Betty and Bobby like a stereo.
3382 with, almost perfect corner weights.
Mm-hmm. Full chassis, LS, gas tank, air conditioning, wiring,
racing.
But no, this one, I think it's funny because I was looking at this when I was getting it ready before. I don't know what's wrong with these pictures. This is the one that the before and after look absolutely identical. Like,
yeah, sometimes I think that's good.
I think it's cool. Yeah, it's not a bad thing. You don't
little lower.
Yeah, it sits right.
Stance.
Yeah, a little bit larger. +2 on the OD, +3 of the wheels, and just come on, it's a '69 Camaro. Like what?
Yeah.
So, but
great car.
That was the first one for George. I was gonna bring it up in the conversation, but I never got the right time. I think he thought we were full of shit
on being able to get it done.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. It was one of those, I'll give you
Just
the rope.
Put your money where your mouth is.
And let's see what happens. But it was really fun to drive it to Columbus. I don't think he even thought it was going to be there when we told him we drove it there.
Or it'd be car show ready that
right.
they had rolled off the trailer and put it back on the trailer.
I'm taking it home, and we had the privilege of doing that a bunch of times since then, and still are. So absolutely awesome episode. Something we've been looking forward to for a while. George could do a lot of things with his time than talk to us, and he chose to do it.
Which is why we elected to just kind of shut up, so you guys didn't have to listen to us.
Yeah. This was
hopefully that lives on forever.
Well, we recorded it.
Yes, we did.
Do the internet.
Yeah.
So forever and ever.
Amen.
We should have George on more because
Travis said it best.
It makes me act a little more mature.
Yes, 100% agree.
I'm glad we got that jingle out before the
because there's no way I
podcast
could do a
started.
jingle
No,
right
I
now.
couldn't.
You couldn't pay me $1 million to do a jingle.
You think you like never do jingles again? Is that the kind of
Oh
lasting
no,
impact
no,
it might
jingles
have?
are coming back. Don't worry about
Okay.
that. Just not for right
next
now.
episode.
Yeah, sure, jingles. Well, thanks everybody for hanging around and listening to Oil and Whiskey.